Welcome to the Awaken You Expert Interviews. I'm Christine Bongiovanni, and I'm a certified life coach. I help women and some pretty cool guys create the love relationship of their dreams by themselves without the involvement of their partner. So here we are, the last Tuesday in January, the very first month of 2021. And in my world, it is just getting better as the weeks go on, as you've heard me talk about a very uncertain first week of the month. And I am going to be ending the month with this expert interview that I'm so looking forward to. My expert guest this week is Dorothy Johnson. She is a breakup coach, and I'm just, like I said, a little bit excited to share her amazingness with all of you today. I actually spent the weekend binging on her podcast because it was so good. She's the creator and host of the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast, where she is creating a tidal wave of brave hearts ready to move on with their lives in confidence, in love, and in control of their emotions. Or should I say, I don't know, are we ever in control of our emotions? We know how to, but sometimes it just seems like they like to run wild. So,
Yeah.
with that, Dorothy, tell us a little bit about you, how you got into coaching, who you help, and why.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love collaborating with my coach colleagues. So fun. So my name is Breakup Coach Dorothy. I have been helping individuals heal their hearts so that they can go on to help heal the world in their own unique ways for about 2 years now. So I'm an expert in breakups and divorce now, but I was not always an expert. So I had a very traumatic breakup back in 2016. So that's about 5 years now. And I had been dating this guy for about 7 years. And he had finished dental school. I had finished my grad school and had this job. And we decided to move back to where I met him in undergrad, which is where his family lives and that he grew up and everything. And so we got a house, we moved, we did everything. And I was like so excited because I was at the time I was 26 and I was like, my life is happening now. We're like done with like this schooling. We can like build a life. We can get the house. We can get married and have kids. And I was just so excited for the life that was like there that I worked so hard for the past 6 years. Um, a month after we moved back, I was in Chicago for a business trip and he broke up with me on the phone. And I was very angry and upset about that. And a month later, I went back to the house to get my things and bring it back up to Chicago. And that's when I found out that he had been seeing someone new. And that woman had been staying at the house ever since we had broken up. And I was very so not only there was like different layers of pain. We talk about this as coaches a lot where there's different layers of emotions. And so not only was I experiencing like the loss, the grief, the sadness of losing the person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, I was also grieving the life that I thought I had built that felt completely just ripped away from me with no say at all. And then I was super angry and resentful about this new girl. I felt so betrayed by him. I felt like she came in and like just took the life that I wanted. I was so upset. And up until that point in my life, luckily, that's one of the biggest, most traumatic events that I had had in my life. But I didn't know how to handle it. I Googled how to get over your ex, how to forgive and let go. I did all of the things that Google told me, like literally all of them. And so I like traveled, I got in the best shape of my life, all from the wrong place, like from like the place of like, he's going to see me and he's gonna like, I'm missing out on this amazing life and this beautiful hot woman.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
and so I was doing all the things externally, like meditating, all of the stuff. So out from the outside, I looked like I was thriving. Everyone was like, you're killing it. Keep going. You're doing so great. But inside, I was just like dying and just seething with so much anger and resentment. Um, And I got into another relationship at that point, and I noticed these reoccurring patterns happening of insecurity, jealousy, things that like this new guy had never done, or he never did anything that would elicit me to feel those feelings, but I was feeling that way, and I was imprinting like old drama from my last relationship onto this new relationship, and I was like, this isn't right, something's not right. Like, why do I still feel this way? Why am I still comparing this new guy to my ex from however long ago? Like, I've done all of the things. I've stayed busy. I took time. Like, I've done it all. Why is this not working? So that's when a friend had sent me to Brooke Castillo's podcast, The Life Coach School. And the first one I listened to was on forgiveness. And that's when I learned all of the things around thoughts create feelings, and learning that forgiveness was for you and not for someone else. And that by not forgiving, you're the only person that's feeling that anger and the resentment. And I just dove in the deep end with Brooke, and I was like, yep, girl, I'm here, going with you. Listen to all the podcasts, signed up for Scholars at the beginning of 2018, signed up for life coach certification in 2019. Or no, that was in 2018, and then was certified by 2019. That's when I started my business. And so ultimately, as I learned that information, one of the biggest epiphanies that I had was that I got over my ex in like a moment, like in an instant. It was when I learned that I had the control over my thoughts, and when I learned that I was creating my own pain, it was literally just the slightest shift of like, he did the best he could, and it all happened for me. It was like those two beliefs, those two thoughts that released so much emotion for me. And when that happened, I was like, wow, this is not taught in the realm or in the industry of heartbreak at all. We are taught by movies, we're taught by, society, by individual, like your friends, family, that it's going to take time, that you have to stay busy, that you need to distract yourself, and everyone's teaching everything the wrong way. And going through that process made me realize like it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to take that like long of a time. It can be one of the biggest, most transformational times of your life where you get to like come home to yourself. And having the capability and the ability to build a life that's even better than what you thought you had with your ex is available. And so that's when I realized like, this is what I need to do for the rest of my life. I don't care what happens or how it happens or what it's going to take. I was put here on this planet to help individuals heal from heartbreak in a completely new way. Like, I see myself being someone who's leading the industry in a completely new way that has never been done before. And I'm just so grateful. And that's why I call everyone brave hearts, is it takes a brave person to step into doing something new, right? To
Mm-hmm.
step into healing your heart in a way that has never been heard of before, and
Mm-hmm.
not give in to like all the things that everyone else is saying.
I love that. So much is going on in my head right now because I just love it. So many things. But before I get into a lot of them, I'd love to hear like what your education was in prior to this and how you felt brave enough to, and maybe they went hand in hand, depending upon what you tell us, but brave enough to say to whatever that journey was to go into life coaching and decide to be all in on that.
Oh, that's such a great question. So it's funny enough, I grew up with a psychologist. So the dad that raised, I have a biological father, but I have a dad that I call dad. He is a psychologist, and he raised me since I can remember. And so I had a psychology background in terms of living with him. I had a very different upbringing when it comes to discipline. Like, I had to write papers and like weird things like that I feel like normal people don't have to do. Um, but so I had that, and then I went to college to be a marine biologist. Quickly found out that that was not my calling. growing up, I grew up in northern Minnesota, which I love that we're both from Minnesota. So,
Yes.
but I grew up in northern Minnesota. So when I moved to Florida to go to marine biology school, I had like so much to catch up on because everyone grew up in by the ocean. So they knew all of these like basic ocean things that I had no idea about.
Not quite the
Anyway,
same as the 10,000 lakes in Minnesota.
not even close.
No?
No. So, I quickly found out marine biology wasn't my thing. So I went into psychology, which is something I told my dad that I would never do. I was like, no way am I ever going to do psychology. Moved into psychology, but I was like, I'm not doing clinical or counseling. That doesn't seem like my vibe. So I went to get my master's in industrial organizational psychology, which is like business psych. So helping with like selection and performance appraisal and data analytics. And that's ultimately what I got my first job out of grad school in, was doing data analytics for a consulting firm where I measured learning and development metrics. So like big organizations like Disney or these pharmaceutical companies, they have all these big sales trainings or they have team trainings, and measuring how effective was that, and did that training actually increase their sales or something like that. So I loved data analytics. It was super fun, but that's also when I found life coaching. And I remember being on the call with Jody Moore when she's selling the life coaching certification.
We were
And
probably on the same call.
probably. I remember this sounds so funny and weird, but I was in the bathtub listening to the call because I was like, I was like, oh, I just joined Scholar. Like I joined Scholars in December of 2018. The call was February of 2018. So I was like, I just joined Scholars, and it was like a hefty toll for me to pay $300. Like at the time, that was so much money to me. Um, so it was like, there's no way I can afford this.
Mhm.
And but I remember being on that call and instantly I was like, yeah, I have to do this. Like, this is absolutely something I have to do. And I called my dad a couple days later, and he was like, that's a terrible idea. You you're going to have to compete against the person selling the training. You're going to have to compete against all the other life coaches. You're going to be competing against therapists, licensed psychologists, all these other people. Like, it doesn't really make sense. You're doing fine in the role that you're doing, and you still have student loan debt from your schooling.
Mm.
Why would you take on more debt to become a life coach? That makes zero sense. And ultimate, like, before I ever even got on the phone with him, though, I knew it was a done deal. I was
Mhm.
just really hoping that he would back me up so it was easier to hit the pay button.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he was like, no, I don't think that's what you should do. It's funny now having these conversations after 2 years, because he's like, oh my God, this blew up in a way that I had no idea. I was like,
Yeah.
yes, I
Yeah.
know. But my mom was super supportive. She talked to me about a situation where she was a nurse and she wished she would have gotten a certification earlier. And she's like, if you want to do it, just do it now, because either you're going to do it now or you're going to do it later. So you might as well do it earlier rather than later. And I was like,
Right.
you're right.
Right. I love it. I love it. So, and really, they kind of went hand in hand. So it wouldn't have hurt you if you stayed where you were either. Right.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
I love that you chose the path that you took. So the next question that came to me was when you were talking about your second relationship. So, and maybe these are your first two, like maybe, I don't want to use the word real, but for lack of a better word, more committed relationships.
Hmm.
Uh, you said in the second one, you were noticing jealousy, envy, and uh,
Insecurity.
insecurity. Did you feel those things in that first relationship?
Yes, absolutely. And
Uh,
I never really had like, and there were never real instances that created them. Like, I don't think there was ever like real cheating happening in my first relationship, and there definitely was no cheating happening in my second relationship, but it was it was just old patterns of like, oh my gosh, I
yeah,
have this thing, I'm going to lose it, and I had to hold on tight so that I didn't lose it,
yeah,
and I had to keep
yeah.
proving my worthiness and my enoughness. And I really hadn't I'd never I didn't even know I wasn't even aware that those were like limiting beliefs or limiting things at all. Like I didn't know. I thought they were just so factual, right? I thought that those were
Mm,
just, oh, I'm just a jealous person. There's nothing I can do about it.
yes,
And
yes.
it,
I mean, that's how we're brought up. That's how we're taught. For the most part, most of us are taught that way. So, what I love about your story is I have different layers of people that I want to help, going all the way down into like the fifth and sixth grade age, 10 to 12, where, you know, girls are coming out of childhood and moving into adulthood, really,
yeah,
and how important our surroundings are, how important it is to have mentors that are, mm, and okay, so there's not mentors in our life that intentionally steer us wrong. I'm sure that, of course that does happen, but for the most part, we're all doing the best that we can. And, but I see that that's where these patterns start once we're born, right? But
mhm,
that's where we start really, um, seeing the world differently and start creating who we're going to be moving forward.
yep.
And so, like with you at 28, was it 28 when you found the life coach school?
Yes. So 20, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So that, like, I didn't find the life coach school until I was, I don't know, like 53.
Hmm.
And I am so grateful for, my future and for my past and for all that it did. But to be able to cut that patterning and change that patterning at that age, it's not as in deeply ingrained. And so, like, when I hear people say that they changed like in an instant, I had that change. I mean, the first podcast, maybe not the first podcast I listened to, but the first one where I realized it might have been the first one where, thoughts create your feelings. I had for the first time been seeing a therapist just for myself. I had done couples therapy, but and I like when I heard that, I brought it to her and I was like, I don't know, this really hurts my head when I hear her say it, but I think there's something there. And then she said, "Oh, listen to it this week." I came back the next week and she's like, "Well, I don't really think that's so true. I don't really agree with her." And I was like, I don't know. I just kept listening. And eventually, I mean, she was a beautiful person. She was a catalyst to my who I am today. But it's been a journey of really changing a lifetime of thought patterns.
Hmm.
So I guess what I would like to hear from you and for you to share with the listeners. So correct me if I'm wrong. You found the life school in that second relationship. And how did that change that relationship?
Oh my God. It changed so much. So much
How
changed in that relationship. Hmm.
Let me ask you another question. So how long were you in the relationship again until you found the life school? And then how did it change at that point?
Yeah. I met him, I think it had been like a year.
Okay.
Yeah. Like a year, maybe even a year and a half that I had known him. Actually, I would say like a year. It was
Okay.
definitely earlier on because I remember being like, hey, I'm going to sign up for this life coach school thing. I'm going to have zero money. And I'm just because we were in long distance flying back and forth from Chicago to Boston. And I remember having that as a pain point in a conversation that we were having. So
Mm.
I think it had been like a year ish um, without the life coach school and then with the life coach school. And so, like I said, it was the insecurity, the jealousy, and those emotions that were coming up. And one of the biggest things that changed was I definitely, my whole life growing up, had been told, like, don't do that or don't say that. You might hurt someone else's feelings. And therefore, the reverse was also true for me, meaning I thought that my ex from the previous relationship was responsible for making me feel secure. secure was an emotion that I constantly like was grabbing for and reaching for and not knowing how to create. And I would do that through the relationships that I had with people. So I'd
Mhm.
get into a relationship, I'd feel secure in the beginning, and then something would happen, and then I'd feel insecure. And I'd say, hey, you need to show up this way so that I can feel secure about our relationship. Like what you're doing isn't going to make me feel secure. You need to change your actions.
I hear you, sister.
Yeah, right, right. And so that I was doing the same thing in the beginning of my relationship with this new guy. The new guy was a photographer, and I literally met him through modeling. So like the image, like he would take images of women. It was like typically it was like kind of risque. It was like we weren't fully clothed. Like it was fun photos, and I loved doing it. And I met him as the photographer, as I was a model. And I knew what I was getting myself into when I got into that relationship. But then I was like, oh my gosh, you can't do this anymore. Like, I don't like you shooting with other girls, all this other stuff. And I made it mean all these things about my worthiness and my enoughness if he wanted to go do this shoot instead of shoot photos of me. But he's like, I can't just fill my entire portfolio with you. Like, it doesn't work that way. Right. And so then when I
Mhm.
found the life coach school, I was like, oh my gosh, that it was like I joined Scholars to address jealousy and insecurity and money.
Mm.
So um that was the first thing I dove into was the jealousy and learning how to feel secure on my own, regardless of what my partner was doing or not doing. And so that changed the dynamic of our relationship a lot in terms of releasing those emotions and then also not being responsible for his emotions. So learning to not react to his reactions and letting him feel whatever he needed to feel and understand that he might think it's because of me, but I know that it isn't. So I don't have to like do anything unless I want to change the way I address something. It was
Yeah.
just freeing. It felt so
Yeah.
freeing. It was the most stable, secure relationship I've ever had in my
Mm.
adult life. Hmm.
Mm. And did he notice the change?
Yeah, absolutely. Hmm.
And did you feel like, so I help people change a relationship on their own, right? So
Yeah.
it's not couples. And that's one of the hardest things for people to grasp that um, if I change the way I think and the way I do things, that the relationship will change. And what about him? He needs to change, or her, depending upon. Um, so, what did you notice in him when you started doing these things?
We could have more open conversation. Like we didn't get so defensive. We weren't so reactive to one another. So when I wasn't getting defensive, he wouldn't. It was like a mirror, right? Like how I was showing up would mirror the behavior of how I would actually want him to show up, but he would just mirror it because I was doing it.
Right,
Um,
right.
and yeah, I feel like that was the biggest thing for us is just being able to have these open conversations and realize we don't have to get angry while we're having the conversation and we don't have to
Yeah.
get defensive about something. And it was almost like a release. Like we both released each other from the idea that we need to show up for one another for the other
Mm,
person, if that makes
I
sense.
like that he even did that with you. How nice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I don't think it's always like that. Like
Hmm.
I love that you're talking about changing the relationship and not needing the other person because I do that with my clients even too. So I sometimes have clients who come to me and like they're not broken up yet or they're about to break up and they think that their partner needs to change, right?
Mm.
Um Same kind of dynamic that you're talking about, but it's
Yeah.
so and sometimes it is really cool when the partner starts adapt like sometimes the partner gets involved and they're like and they're doing thought work together and they sit down and do a model together. I'm like, what? That's so
Yeah.
cool. My
Yeah.
partner wasn't doing models with me. He wasn't interested in me coaching him or anything like that. Um,
Oh,
but even when they're not involved in that way, you can totally change the dynamic of the relationship. And it also reminds me of situations where um like when we feel like we're out it's something's outside of ourselves, which happens a lot with family. You probably get this too where women want a family, right? They want to have a
mhm.
baby and they feel like it's outside their control because they need someone else to create the family dynamic.
Right.
When in reality it's like, oh my god, but you're when we're looking for all the things we don't have control over, we miss what we actually do have control over, which is like the energy that we show up with, the people that we meet, the situations we put ourselves in, all of it.
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's so important.
Yeah. So, are you still with this guy? And So
Just
yes or no, first of
no,
all?
no,
Okay.
I'm not. Mm-mm.
So how did that breakup compare to the first one?
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited we're talking about this because it has gone so like this breakup because it was recent actually.
Okay.
It was a completely different experience. So much less trauma, so much less drama, and so much less resistance. It was very like free flowing, peaceful, calm. It doesn't mean that there wasn't loss, that there wasn't grief or sadness, but it was just, it was deep, but it wasn't, what's the word? I want to say it was deep, but it wasn't like thrashing waters, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. I mean, I want to ask you why, but it totally, why it was different, but it totally makes sense because um, I've just been through a cycle of grief. And really the first deep grief since I got certified and found, the life coach school. And I actually just published a post today about like daring myself to love without limits, like full on out, because the depth and the depth of that pain is really a signifier of how much love we created before that loss. And when we learn how to process that pain and recognize why we're feeling that pain, not from a place of anger and blame and resentment. It actually, like, okay, so pain hurts. That's why it's called pain, but it hurts in a beautiful way.
Mhm.
So tell me why it was different the second time around.
I mean, the answer that is just like screaming at me in my brain right now is I mean, I did a lot of things differently. Like I handled it very different. Like I took my time making the decision. Um yeah, so there were some things that were different, but it was also just I'm a different human. Like I know deep down in my bones that everything is always happening for me and not to me. I've become just someone who I genuinely believe. I mean, I talk about this all the time to my brave hearts, but I genuinely believe my life is going to be amazing regardless of who's in it. And I always talk about building a life that is the analogy that I use is you build this beautiful big sundae, and the person who joins you for the sundae is just the cherry on top. And if that cherry rolls
Mm,
off the sundae, it's like no big deal because you still have this beautiful sundae.
I love that
Um,
analogy.
right. And so living from that place, it's like I just got to a point where I spent a lot of time thinking about this. This is something that it wasn't a decision that I made very quickly. And I was actually speaking to another coach. The whole reason this whole thing spurred breaking up with my current partner, because there was nothing wrong. Like we were great together. It was whatever. But I did a lot of thought work on different behaviors and different value differences. I did a lot of thought work around the relationship and really truly spent my time getting to the place of like loving him unconditionally, no matter who he was and what he did. Um, but then I was talking to a coach colleague, and it was just so wild. We were talking about our businesses, and she's like, I just want to get to the place where I like I love my niche and it's easy. Like I do all this thought work on my niche, but I want it to be like how I love my husband. It's just so easy for me to love my husband. I don't have to do a bunch of thought work around loving my husband. And a light bulb went off and my mind exploded and I was like, that's available? Like I kind of like thought we all had to do a lot of thought work on the people we were loving because you like live with them and you're in it with them. But then I realized how easy it is for me to love my niche. It's so
Mm,
easy for me to love my Bravehearts. They do crazy things and sometimes they
mhm,
write terrible things about me or they'll send me a DM mad at me and I still love them. Like so
mhm.
easy. I don't have to do a lot of thought work on it.
Yeah,
So when I realized that, I was like, oh, dang, like I kind of want to try out a relationship like that. Like I want to
yeah.
try a relationship that's easy. Like I want to try a relationship that I don't have to do a lot of thought work on. If that's available, I would like to try that on and see how it goes.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then then I still took my time to make the actual decision of leaving the relationship. I wanted to get to a place where I felt good about it, regardless of what happened. Um, and that's when I decided to leave. And then it was very different in the leaving process because we had multiple open conversations about it before it took place. We had plans and structures and process. Like it was there was a masculine way of approaching it where it's like I had a lot of structures in place, and I thought about, if one of my brave hearts was going through this, what might be the best way for them to
Mm,
go through it? Is that the best way for me? Looking at all the
mm,
different dynamics.
yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your podcast, about your program.
Yeah.
Tell us
I love so
how
my
you, yeah, tell us how you help people. You
yeah,
kind of told
so
us that, but
the podcast is literally like a library of everything that I ever wanted to know when I was going through my breakup.
mm,
I remember my ex from so long ago would listen to podcasts all the time, and I wasn't really into podcasts when I was dating him. And I remember going through the breakup and then searching through podcasts, being like, there's got to be a breakup podcast or something. Like, how do I get over my ex in a podcast format? And I couldn't find anything. I
mm,
didn't find anything, literally zero, zip, nada.
mm,
So I knew that once I became a life coach, that one of the first things I was going to do is create a podcast. And of course, um, I did a blog first, I did Facebook Lives, all of that until I did finally eventually start the podcast in October of 2019. And so I create new content each week and make sure that you guys have everything that I wanted when I was going through my heartbreak. And it's just
yeah.
built into this amazing community, which has been also really great. Where all the brave hearts like talk to one another. And of course, we can't do that on the podcast, but they go over to Breakup Coach Dorothy on Instagram. And it's almost like a heartbreak cafe where people get
Yeah.
to talk and like get to know one another. And I love building the communities and things like that. So
Mm,
that's been super fun. And then the program is called Get Over Your Ex in 3 Months or Less. So, oh my gosh, I have so much gratitude for this program because it's just, and as a coach, you probably get this where it evolves so much over the lifespan of coaching. So it's like in 2018 is when I created the bare bones structure of what the program was. And since then, after coaching so many individuals and then also putting myself through my own program in my most recent breakup and like going through that process, it's just magic. It is magic. And so it's like, and it's just exploded into something bigger than I thought it was ever going to be. So it's like you have like the content. We have the breakup masterclass, which I call like the Netflix of breakup. So it's like all of the content, all these videos. I recently created a beautiful, oh my gosh, workbook. I don't know, maybe I showed you this the last time we were on a call together, but
I saw it. I saw
right?
it on Instagram because who created it for you?
Dina
Nina.
Rudders.
So I saw it on her
Mhm.
post. Yeah.
Yes, she's amazing. But then so you have the breakup Bible is what I'm calling that. But
I love it.
it's like has daily activities, exactly what you're supposed to be doing each day. And it's just been proven and tested so many times that I know that it works for anyone who gets involved. And then,
Mm,
of course, coaching. So we have like group coaching. I do one-on-one check-ins with them. We have the unlimited written coaching within the Slack channel altogether. And then the community of like there is nothing like that community of brave hearts.
mm,
They just
yeah.
support one another in there. And I'm obsessed because if I would have had that going through my heartbreak, like, uh, game changer.
Right. There's nothing like, well, especially when you're learning a new process.
Hmm.
So having that support is one thing before this, like,
Yeah.
and they're mostly just self-defeating thoughts,
Yeah.
like you're right, he's a bastard, all those things,
Yep.
versus a whole new way to look at it and talk
Mhm.
about it amongst your new friends.
Yes.
So we've got your podcast. Do you
Mhm,
have a free offer? So they can go to your podcast, listen to
mhm.
that, and I highly recommend it. One of the podcasts I listened to was, and I'm not going to say the title of it correct, but you had interviewed at the end two of your brave hearts who were back together with their ex. And so it was just fun to listen to. And then, so we've got the podcast to get to know you better and what you do. Do you have any free online course that they could do to just get a feel?
Yeah. So once a quarter, I do a free 5-day breakup boot camp. I just ran it, so it's not going to be around until next quarter. But if you get onto my website, I do have 7 days of breakup tips. So if you go to the
Mm,
website at dorothyaBjohnson.com, you can click on a link that will link you up with 7 days worth of breakup tips. And then once you're on my email list, you'll definitely be notified when the next breakup boot camp starts. So you can sign up for that too. That's amazing. This round, oh my gosh. I revamped the training material this time, and I talk about you get 5 months of healing in 5 days. And
mm.
there were multiple individuals in this round that were like, I got over my ex. I'm over him. And I'm like,
Oh,
what? That like blows
nice.
my mind. That blows
Right.
my mind.
Right, right. Well, and even between now and when you launch that again,
Mhm.
if they're listening to your podcast, they're going to start getting this information and they're listening to my stuff or reading my stuff. And they're already kind of, that helps a lot. I think if people are already somewhat identifying with the thought work,
Mhm.
and understanding a new way of thinking. So tell me, can you share one thing with the listeners that might help them with what they're struggling with? Just like any last words of wisdom, and maybe a resource that you could refer them to.
Yeah. So I feel like if you're going through anything that was like similar to my situation, when in terms of like feeling so much betrayal, anger, loss, sadness, and feeling like your life was just completely ripped away from you without any say, I think the one piece of advice that I want to gift you is that your only job right now is to believe that whatever you thought you were going to have is still available to you, regardless of that person being in your life or not. That person is not going to dictate you creating that. I don't care if you want a family, if you want babies, if you want the exact life you had with that person, you can still go out and create that.
Mm,
And that is what I was dedicated and committed to when like throughout my process is like I wanted the same exact life that I had with him but on my own so that no one
mm,
could ever take it from me. And that is what is so important to me in helping my brain. It's not just about getting over your ex, it's about creating that specific life that you wanted. And your only job right now, I'm so serious, your only job right now is to believe that it's possible for you to do that.
I love that.
And then my resource is going to be my podcast.
Absolutely. I mean, for sure, like I fell in love. One of the things that I love, because when we're in the middle of it, like when you're in the middle of that breakup, one of the things I love doing myself, and I share it with my clients to kind of get you out of like being in the middle of that quicksand where you're just, going down, is to come up with at least three different scenarios of how this is going to change your life in a good way, like
Mhm.
how this has happened for you.
Yeah.
And just being able to explore, I mean, it doesn't get you completely out of your pain because your brain's going to go back to that, but it gets you exploring what some of the other options might be moving forward.
Yes. Mhm.
Well, I so appreciate this time that you have given my audience. I feel honored to have been able to have you on my audio blog.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. I really appreciate
yes,
being here and talking with you. It's so my favorite. I love it.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for joining my Awaken You expert interviews. If you enjoyed listening, then you have to go check out my Awaken You one on one coaching program, where we take all of this material and we apply it to your love life. And we study it, We take it to your next level and create the love relationship of your dreams, whether you're in a relationship right now or looking to be in a relationship in the future. If you have any questions, comments, or coaching issues you'd like me to talk about here on the blog, reach out to me. Go to my website, scroll down to the bottom, send me an email, and let's awaken you. Ciao.